So, I honestly thought about not filming a first thoughts right away, going to get dinner and thinking about it for a while, but you know what? That wouldn't be first thoughts, so here are my first thoughts.
Well, that was a movie.
Hello, welcome back to Simon's Rants. I'm Simon, and I just saw Babylon, the new film that was written and directed by Damien Chazelle, starring Margot Robbie and Brad Pitt. It's also got a cameo by Tobey Maguire, who's not playing Charlie Chaplin. I don't know how that rumor got started. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about. Or maybe I'm just from an alternate universe where that was a thing, but people were saying that Tobey Maguire was playing Charlie Chaplin in this movie. He wasn't, so there's that. In case you don't know what I'm talking about, Babylon, like I said, is a film written and directed by Damien Chazelle, and it takes place, it's a period piece from the 1920s and 30s about early Hollywood. So you've got Brad Pitt, who's a famous actor at the time from the silent era, trying to make a transition into talking movies. You've got Margot Robbie, who is a nobody trying to make it in Hollywood, and then I forget his name actually. He was a new actor I'm not familiar with. Diego Calva, who's the main character of this movie. If you go on IMDb, the first four people listed are Brad Pitt, Margot Robbie, Jean Smart, and Olivia Wilde. Brad Pitt is not the main character. He's in it a decent amount. Margot Robbie is not the main character, but she is in it a decent amount. Jean Smart is a side character. Olivia Wilde has one scene, and then Diego Calva, who is the main character of this movie. So IMDb, get your shit together. So if you're thinking that sounds kind of familiar, you know, a period piece about Hollywood with actors trying to transition from silent era to talking films, it's because, yeah, that's been done multiple times recently, actually. It's not quite the same thing, but Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is about a changing of eras with actors feeling out of touch, and has Brad Pitt and Margot Robbie both in it. But even more similarly is, God, the Coen Brothers movie, what is it called? Hail Caesar. Both this and that were directly inspired by Singing in the Rain. This even more so than that, but a lot of very similar things happening because they are both playing homage to the same movie, and so having these scenes where actors are attempting to talk for the first time on screen and having to learn how to not have their accent and how to project correctly and all these things. Even though they were successful in silent films, now they're not so much. And so this movie, for large portions, kind of felt redundant because it was telling the same story we have before, but it's not all that. This movie is wild. This movie is all over the place, and I mean that both as a compliment and as a detriment. I'm still trying to process this movie. I don't know what I think about it yet, so I'm kind of just gonna get my first thoughts on it. Huh, what a wild concept. Who came up with that? Yeah, so the main character, Manny, is just trying to, in any way he can, make it into Hollywood. So the opening shot, the opening scene has him just, you know, as the handyman. He's kind of just showing up to big celebrity parties. He's, you know, bringing the entertainment. He's chauffeuring people around. He's doing whatever. And eventually he's trying to climb his way up into the ranks of being a producer and an executive and all these things. Meanwhile, Margot Robbie, who is a struggling actress, he meets at this party and instantly falls in love with her, but they're in two completely different worlds at this point already. So it's an interesting concept because of that, and then it's also an interesting concept because of a lot of spoilers that I can't get into, but this movie is crazy. It's also not entirely what I expected. I went into this stupidly kind of thinking that this was a love letter to Hollywood, but if you know Damien Chazelle, he doesn't write love letters to anything. He writes love-hate letters. If you've seen Whiplash, if you've seen La La Land, you know that both of those are kind of like love-hate relationships, where it's like if you are obsessive enough to want something enough to do anything, there's a heavy price to pay. You know, Whiplash, he loses everything, he almost dies. Spoilers for the 8-year-old movie. La La Land, they have to break up if they want to succeed and reach their dreams. So it's not a straight love letter. It's here is the scenario. Good and bad, make of it what you will. And so silly me went into this going, oh, so he's going to be talking about Hollywood and the excess of it and all of that, but it's going to be ultimately a love letter to Hollywood. No, that's not what it is at all. And I should have, the name alone is a clue. Babylon. He's calling Hollywood Babylon. And for those who don't know what Babylon is, it's just a word that you've heard before. Babylon is like a word for like sinful excess, like Sin City. That's what Babylon is. And that's how Hollywood is portrayed in this. LA is portrayed in this. Not only is it not what I expected because of that, though, it didn't feel like his previous movies. Both Whiplash and La La Land, I haven't seen First Man, but those two movies are very artsy, very like indie feeling. This is in every way just a big blowout, excess, like, and it's kind of like quick-witted, and there's a lot of dialogue. It reminded me of like a Coen Brothers movie more than anything, except frankly in some areas it reminded me of Barbarian, but I'll get into that later. There's just twists and turns here. There's a lot of characters doing weird things and having bad decisions being made constantly, so it wasn't at all what I expected or knew I wanted from a Damien Chazelle movie. And I still think it's probably his worst movie of those three. Like I said, I haven't seen the Astronaut movie, but he didn't write that, so it's kind of only half a Damien Chazelle movie anyway. But I'm not saying that I dislike this either. I'm trying to figure out what I think of it, because it was so crazy. Like, I would like to believe that the message of this movie is, you know, Hollywood is evil, because that's kind of what is being said throughout a lot of it. But there's also still that love side to this love-hate letter, this love-hate relationship, where it's like, we do what we do. Those of us who are crazy enough, once again, he's using that thing, those of us who are crazy enough to want the attention and need the attention and want to be artists, it's worth every second of hell, every piece of hell that you go through to be remembered forever, which is kind of how I feel like this movie ends in a way. And that's not a spoiler or anything, but I'm just like saying, I feel like that's kind of the flavor of this movie. So I am torn on that, because obviously, you know, it's a fun way to look at things in both Whiplash and La La Land, that's not telling you how to feel about anything. It's showing you the good, it's showing you the bad, and kind of letting you decide to an extent. And that's how I feel about this. But there's also just, this isn't as well made of a movie as those were. Like, there's just technical things, for instance, like a lot of bad dubbing. A lot of really bad dubbing, like multiple times where you see somebody's mouth moving completely differently than what they're saying, and it's like, isn't this a high-budget movie? What are we doing here? Bad editing. This movie is over 3 hours, and it really didn't need to be. You know, I wasn't bored for the first 2 hours, but that last hour, I'm like, I'm kind of getting restless here. I don't know where we're going. I feel like this could have ended earlier. I don't know if we needed the last half hour. Like, there was things here that could have been cut, it felt like. So, yeah, it's not technically perfect, whereas, like, Whiplash and La La Land, I would say, for the most part, are, and you may or may not like some of the acting or directing or writing in those movies, but they're extremely well made. You've got good directing and very good acting. I mean, Margot Robbie is almost always great. Brad Pitt is always good. I don't know if I've ever seen him act poorly in anything. And then the new guy, I forgot his name already, but he played Manny. He was good. Also, Tobey Maguire, he's not in it a lot, but he steals the scenes he's in. So, I mean, it's a very good cast, and the director knows what he's doing. And like I said, the dialogue is witty, it's fast, so it's well written dialogue-wise. I just think maybe the editing could have been tighter. Some of the dubbing should have been not done or done better or whatever. Overall, like, it's a well-made movie. And I think its goal was to kind of just make you think, and if that was the goal, it succeeded at that. If the goal was to make an enjoyable movie, I don't know that it succeeded at that, but I don't think that was the goal. I don't know that you're supposed to enjoy this movie. There's some movies that aren't meant to be enjoyed. They're made to make you think and make you squirm and make you uncomfortable. And I enjoyed parts of this movie because it's funny, it's energetic, it's exciting at times, but I mean, I wouldn't say that I had a great time, like a good time, like I wasn't happy and smiling on my way out. I was just kind of like, oh man, I wonder what that was about, you know? And so that's why these first thoughts are pretty rough, because I don't know what I think about it yet, but maybe that's a good thing. Maybe this is just a movie that's made to sit and think about for a while. So if you want to sit with me a little bit longer, I'm going to get into spoilers now. Keep verbally processing it and see what I think about it. And yeah, hopefully decide by the end of this video if I like it or not. But if not, you know, we'll just talk about it some more. But like I said, spoilers will be involved, so if you don't want anything spoiled, please go watch it first, come back, and we can talk about it then. But if you're new here, please remember to subscribe, also like, comment, and share, and all that good stuff. So thanks, bye. So, spoilers. Excuse me, I'm getting sick. Yeah, so this whole time Manny is chasing Margot Robbie's character. He's in love with her, like I said, from first sight. Their careers go in very different directions. His is a slow burn. It takes him a while to get famous and successful. She's famous and successful immediately, but then her career flames out. So she's like too good for him at first, but then remembers him. And then when it switches and he's successful, then she has to go to him for help, and he tries to help her, but she's crazy. She's just literally insane and has gotten herself into really big trouble. So he tries to save her, but he can't, and she ends up dying off screen at some point, and he has to start over a new life, presumably in Mexico, but then he says something about New York later. I'm not sure exactly, but regardless, it's another one of these just sad love stories that it just can't work out because things aren't going right. I think in the previous movies that Chazelle made, you know, Whiplash and La La Land, both times the main characters prioritize the work over love, and in this one he attempts to prioritize the love over the work, and it almost works, but then it doesn't. And so that's an interesting twist on the Chazelle narrative that we normally get. So that was cool. That was interesting. Unfortunately for him, it didn't work out. You were pulling for them. You wanted them. They were both likable characters to an extent. I mean, partially because the acting was so good, but partially because you just felt for them and you wanted them to be successful, and you wanted them to, you know, get out of Hollywood and away from all of the shit that was going on. Like I said, there's some barbarian type stuff going on because they go to this one club, if you will, with Tobey Maguire's character, and they go down these like 4 layers of hell, and each layer is getting worse and worse. You've got like a fight club on the first layer, then you've got some sort of torture porn dungeon, and then you've got I don't even know what in the third one, and then the fourth one you've got a geek eating live rats, and it was reminiscent of Nightmare Alley, but even scarier. So it was just like, it was a horror movie there for 5 minutes, and it was very well executed. I was wondering if part of the reason this movie, it's getting like good reviews from people but bad reviews from critics, and I wonder if it's because it's, you know, hinting at not literally the Illuminati, because it never makes any sort of accusations of the Illuminati, but it talks about how perverted and how disgusting and how perverse Hollywood and LA and that whole area is, and just how disgusting that world is. And there's a scene where they're trying to reinvent Margot Robbie's character because she's this crass New Jersey girl, and they're trying to make her into this proper lady. And so she goes to this party, and she tries and tries and tries, and then she flips out, goes crazy, and during her rant, as she's freaking out, she yells at the proper people, like, you're not better than me, you think you're better than me, and you're not. I'm not an animal, you know. And so that's an interesting conversation that I'm wondering if it's actually being had, where it's like Damien Chazelle is still fairly young. He's like 35 or something, 37 I think it is. So he's still fairly young. He's under 40, and he's in this world. He had immediate success, and then you wonder, is this a commentary about his experience in Hollywood, where it's like he got there, and everybody in this movie that has had success kind of regrets it in a way. Maybe not regrets it, but reaps bad because of it. Brad Pitt's character ends up committing suicide. Manny, the main character, has to run away and start a new life, or he'll be murdered. Margot Robbie either drug overdoses or is murdered. We don't know what happens to her. All of these characters are just, their lives are ruined by you know, this world. And I wonder if it's like a cry for help from Damien Chazelle, where it's like, I used to be that innocent kid who went into Hollywood thinking, oh, this is a magical world, and then you realize, oh, it's not so magical, it's actually pretty depraved. So that is a theory that I had about the meaning of it, and I think maybe that's part of it. But at the same time, the movie ends with this cut forward to the 50s. Manny comes back to Hollywood for some reason. Like, if I was him, running away from people, running away from Tobey Maguire trying to kill me because I gave him fake money, I would never come back, you know. But for whatever stupid reason, he decided to come back, and he decides, you know what, screw it, I'll go to the movies. And he buys a ticket that just so happens to be to Singing in the Rain. And he realizes, as watching Singing in the Rain, in this alternate universe, this Singing in the Rain was based partially on Margot Robbie's life, Brad Pitt's life, and maybe a little bit of his. But regardless, he's watching that and he's weeping because he's like, there's Margot Robbie, and there's Brad Pitt. But then Singing in the Rain comes up, which is a song that he was involved with, apparently, supposedly back in the late 20s or early 30s. They had this song, and he used this song. This song was involved in a movie he was working on producing that he then took this musician out of. There's this whole other side character, this musician, that he also is kind of like the guy that gets out just in time. He's like the one guy that has a happy ending, maybe, because he's asked to do things that he isn't willing to do, and so he leaves. He's this black musician, and he's asked to perform in blackface because he's not black enough, and so he does it, instantly regrets it, and then quits. And then he's the only one that seems to have somewhat of a happy ending. Sure, his job isn't as good as what it was, but he seems okay now. All this stuff is in this movie, and Manny's character, who had been weeping, sees it, and he starts to smile. And in that moment, you're like, ah, shit, there's the crazy. Because same thing in Whiplash, same thing in La La Land. It may be torture, you're going through this torture, this awful stuff, but you're willing to do it just to be remembered, or just to have that fame, or whatever their goal is as an artist, as a musician, as a whatever. Like I said, it's not really clear morally. It doesn't tell you how to feel about it. And you know what? That's not a bad thing. It's a very common thing nowadays in movies where people demand to have a clear-cut answer. Like, the main character is obviously good, and everything they do is obviously right, and, you know, outcomes have to be explained. They have to force feed you how to feel about a movie. That's why people watch Taxi Driver and movies like American Psycho and don't get it and go, oh, he's a character I want to model myself after. And it's like, no, just because they're the main character doesn't mean they're the protagonist. I mean, literally it does, but it doesn't mean they're good. You can make the antagonist the main character of a story. Or in movies like Taxi Driver, they can be both good and bad. Like, I mean, he's trying to save a prostitute, he's trying to save somebody's life, but he's still a murderer, you know? So it's like, modern audiences can't accept ambiguity. And this movie is extremely ambiguous in the ending and how you are supposed to feel about anything that happens in this movie. And so I think people are going to struggle with it, but that's not therefore a bad thing or a reason to dislike this movie. It's actually, to me, a reason to respect this movie in that it's taking risks. And that's what I can say about everything about this movie, was whether or not I agreed with every decision that was being made, whether or not I liked every decision that was made, or anything in the movie at all for that matter, I can respect all of it because I know that Damien Chazelle, who I know for a fact is a good writer-director because I've seen it already. He's not just lucky. He's made good movies, multiple good movies. He swung for the fences here. And it's one of those things where maybe it wasn't his best work. Maybe it wasn't even a great movie, but you know what it was? It was an artistic expression. It was a risk being taken by an artist. It was an attempt to make something new and different and original. And yeah, there are times where it felt like he was copying a couple other movies. Like I said, there's similarities between this and Hail Caesar and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, but it is still its own thing. And Damien Chazelle swung for the fences. It is a movie that I will be thinking about and that will be stuck in my head for a while, and had amazing performances and some really great moments and some great imagery. I would probably give it a 7. I'm thinking like a 7 territory, which I wanted to give it a rating because I feel I keep the past 3 movies. I can't have all my movies and I'll be like, I'm not rating it. I don't do that anymore. And maybe I shouldn't because I can't seem to come up with ratings anymore. But like, these movies aren't asked to be rated. They're just asked to be observed and thought about. And that is valid, you know? It's not entertainment, it is art. There's a difference, and this isn't just a joyride. It is something to chew on, it's something to think about, something to observe, something to respect. And yeah, I think it works. I do. I would need to see it again, but I'm also kind of fatigued by it. I don't want to watch it again immediately, but it asks to be watched again, and it asks to be talked about and thought about. I wish I'd seen it with somebody else because yeah, it really deserves to be talked about and have multiple opinions and multiple voices and brains all coming together to observe this, because it is art. Like I said, I wouldn't say I enjoyed it because it's not a funny-go-lucky happy time, but I enjoy thinking about it. I enjoy questioning it. I enjoy poking at it and being like, well, what is the message here? Maybe you would watch it and come away and say there is no message, you're overthinking it, or maybe you would just be as fascinated as I am. I don't know. It's one of those things that, like, yeah, that's part of the conversation. This movie asks to be talked about, so you have to have that conversation, and that to me is fascinating. So yeah, I don't know if there's anything else to talk about other than shit humor and puking humor, which you already know if you've seen my channel at all. I hate that stuff. It honestly didn't bother me as much as that stuff normally would, because I think it was just done well, which is cool. There was a way overabundance, you know, of sex and drugs, but that's the point. I mean, the whole point of the movie is excess. So I get that it was necessary, but it was still exhausting. If you saw it, let me know what you thought about it in the comments below. And of course, don't forget to like, share. If you're new here, subscribe. Thanks, guys. Bye. Man, I need to just watch something easy. All of these movies have been